This is Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, produced by Studio 5 at Mud Advertising, Totally Iowa Media, and News Talk 1540 KXCL, where you hear from the candidates in contested races in the June 2026 Iowa primary election. Now, Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. From Studio 5 at Mud and Cedar Falls, here is Jeff Stein.
Well, indeed, we heard from 17 candidates who appeared on the June primary election ballot. The results are now in, votes counted, officially certified, and we know who will be facing off in the November general election. But before we look to November, let's take a look back at June. And I'm joined at the Iowa Talking Points table by a couple of familiar faces. Gentry Collins is founder and CEO of the American Free Enterprise Chamber of Commerce and principal at CAP Public Affairs, and Rob Mudd, chief futurist at Mud Advertising and one of the authors of the new book, The Ad Man 2.0. Gentlemen, good to chat with you again here at the table.
Good to be back with you.
Of all the things that happened on June 2nd, I think it's fair to say that the Republican race for governor is the one that had the most attention going in and perhaps had the most surprising result as things played out. So, Gentry, I'll ask you first of all, was that your headline from the day, and what thoughts do you have at the top of the conversation on it?
It's one of two headlines on my mind. The other headline is that Democrats, I think, nominated some very strong candidates. They look like Iowa Democrats, and I think they'll make races very, very competitive in a state that has looked redder than it had been historically over the last few cycles. But certainly the big headline is the gubernatorial upset, Zach Lane becoming the Republican nominee. There was some chatter that he was rising, but in a multi-way race against a candidate in Randy Feenstra that I think most people for most of the year believed was a foregone conclusion, that has to be the big surprise.
Rob, I'll ask you for your headline. Agree with Gentry or take it in a different direction as you wish?
Well, I agree with Gentry, but my headline might be Feenstra misses the debate, right? Mm-hmm. I mean,
yeah,
there's certain things that you have to do, and one would be to present yourself to the people.
Yeah.
And without that, you miss it. And it was a big miss, I think.
As we think about that race for governor, and again, just to set the table to remind people, Iowa law says in a primary with more than two candidates, you have to get 35% plus one vote. And I think, Gentry, going in, we were all wondering, would somebody get 35%?
Yes.
Because some of us framed it as Feenstra and non-Feenstra, thinking that the four non-Feenstra candidates would sort of fragment. I did not see two candidates getting above 35%. I didn't see that coalescence from your aspect. It moved quickly.
Well, it did. I think you're in good company. I think a lot of people did not see that coming. A couple of the candidates, one in particular, I think ran a campaign around preparing for a convention on the idea that, in fact, we will not have somebody over 35%. And conventions, at least on the Republican side in the last couple of decades, have tended to nominate somebody that perhaps wasn't the top vote getter on primary day. And so a smart strategy, by the way, if it goes to convention, which in this case it turned out not to do.
Rob, as you're looking at the messaging that we saw, there were not a lot of TV ads for Sherman and Stein and Andrews. Zach Lane had a lot of money and put a lot of ads out there. As a consumer of that information and as someone who presents messages professionally, give us a sense of the Lane campaign on TV.
Well, this may sound silly on my part. I never saw one Lane ad. Never. Now, this is what's changed in media today. I have to use an app, right? My app is a YouTube TV app. And it isn't the same as a cable television ad or cable hookup where you buy a zone and everybody gets it, right? Buying app advertising is different. And maybe they missed my zip code. I don't know, but I never saw an ad. I saw Randy's ad. I saw a ton of Rob Sands ad. I never saw a Lane ad.
And that's interesting, and we see that where Rob Sand had no opposition in the primary, yet spent a lot of money sort of to raise his hand and say, don't forget, I'm part of the mix too. How effective have his ads been leading up to the election? It's a different tone now.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job. I thought that they were very impactful. I thought they were smart. I thought they were to the point. They weren't rambling. They had purpose. His purpose was, hey, it's not right for people to steal your tax money, right? And I think we all would say, yeah, you're right about that, right? So I thought his ads were they hit home, and I thought they were much better than Randy's. And then the ones I didn't see were, I guess, better than Randy's too, because I didn't see any of them.
The Feenstra campaign, Gentry, started running ads right after he started running, which was right after the seat became open. So
Yes.
he had a year of a run-up and just was never able to marshal the support necessary. When Congressman Feenstra first announced, that kept a lot of people, statewide office holders, other members of Congress, on the sideline.
Yes.
They just kind of sat back, and then other people came in. But at no point did it ever seem inevitable, did it?
I think early on it might have seemed inevitable to some of those other candidates, and I think that's why Randy ran those early ads.
Yes.
Remember candidates like Brenna Byrd, for example, who's the Attorney General, of course, running for re-election, and I think running a strong campaign, was in pole position to have the Trump endorsement early on. Randy came out, raised a bunch of money early, put it on TV, tried to look like a candidate that was inevitable. And at the beginning of the race, that seems to have worked. I think he did help set the field, but then he was never able to outgrow that. And in fact, in some ways, I think he ended up playing prevent defense. I mean, Rob's point about not showing up, not only to the debates, but to grassroots events all over the state, I think is exactly right. We are a retail state. We're accustomed to seeing our presidential candidates, as this program very well knows. You know, the old joke, who are you going to vote for in the caucuses? Well, I don't know. I've only met him 3 times.
Right.
You know, there is something to that. And Randy sort of missed that.
Yeah.
So I think those early ads were really pretty effective for the purpose they were intended for. And then there was just nothing after that.
Congressman Feenstra, because of redistricting, has at one time or another represented 50 of Iowa's 99 counties.
Yeah.
So you can't say there was a name recognition issue, maybe in the eastern half of the state, but still, he kept a pretty high profile, appeared on my radio program regularly as a member of Congress. So it's not like, well, we don't know who this guy is.
Yeah.
The Trump endorsement that came on the Friday before the primary, there is some reporting now from Politico suggesting that the president is very upset that his consultants, his insiders, urged him to make that recommendation at that point, because as we are having this conversation on June 11th, that's still the only blemish on the president's endorsement record. So why the endorsement at that time, do you think?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. I think it was a foolish endorsement. I think that the president's track record, as you allude to, has been very, very good, Randy being the only miss thus far. One of the things that's been a bit of a mystery to me is why he endorses late, generally speaking. I think there are some primaries that could have been avoided and some very expensive primaries that could have been avoided had the president endorsed early, right? Other than Feenstra, his endorsement seems to be very highly effective. And yet many of them come late after a great deal of money is spent, which seems relevant to me because if you're the president, your interest is to staunch the midterm bleeding, so to speak, that always befalls the party of the president, right? I think historically it's something like 22 or 23 seats on average in the House that the party of the president loses. Of course, this president only has a seat or two to lose. The Senate looks like it may be in play. And so why allow all of that money to be spent on primaries if you could stop some of those primaries by endorsing earlier, keep some of that money in the bank, spend those dollars on general elections to try to preserve a Senate a majority? I'm not sure that I can explain to you why the endorsement process hasn't been a little more predictable.
And Rob, the president did make endorsements in Iowa races months before. Immediately, he endorsed Congresswoman Ashley Hinson for U.S. Senate. That did not avoid a primary, but it certainly helped. He endorsed Joe Mitchell, who wound up winning the nomination, and that also limited some of the candidates. And I think of South Carolina. You had two sitting representatives run for governor. The president at the last minute endorsed the current lieutenant governor, who wound up winning. But look at the dominoes that fall. From folks that you talk to, or do endorsements even matter these days? Or is it a matter that we're Iowans and we're darn independent?
I think they do matter. I think they do. When you're Trump, they matter tremendously. And his weight in the MAGA following, it makes a difference. How it didn't make a difference in Iowa, I'm not sure. Maybe because it was late and Ashley was so soon that it wasn't maybe a sincere endorsement. It was, I got to do something, so this is what I got to do, and I did it.
I also question how many primary voters who had not already made up their mind were aware of the endorsement having happened on Friday when they went to the polls on Tuesday. You said earlier you didn't see any Zach Lane ads. I saw very few, and I don't know that I saw any ads between the endorsement and primary day that talked about that endorsement.
Yeah, no, I never saw one.
And what was interesting in terms of what I'm calling the dominoes falling. So here it is Friday before the Tuesday primary, and there's some scuttlebutt. There's a poll, and we don't have good independent polling anymore. I'm not sure how accurate it was the last decade even in the state, but we don't have news outlets doing polls. There was a poll suggesting that Lane and Feenstra were neck and neck, and maybe Lane a little ahead, and it seemed that in response to that, the president endorsed Feenstra. Well, in response to that, Turning Point USA Action endorsed Lane. And so you got all of this last-minute stuff, but to everyone's point, the voting had been going on for weeks. And people had sort of made up their minds by then.
Yeah. And I think for Feenstra, there was a deeper underlying problem. And I'll tie it, Rob, to the comment you made about just not showing up, whether for the debate or for other events. And I think that is, he looked like a traditional Republican, go after the money kind of candidate in a Mitt Romney-esque kind of a way. And yet the base of the Republican Party in Iowa today looks nothing like that. There are, I think, a small handful of issues that become emblematic, the carbon capture pipeline being one of those. And regardless of which side of that debate you're on, that's a tough one in a Republican primary today. Randy very clearly took a position early on to bring money into the campaign. That position was the donor position and not the grassroots position. And then one of the things I found interesting, and one of the real, as you say, we didn't have great polling, but one of the indicators in the weeks before the primary that Randy didn't have the strength that he had portrayed earlier on was his finance report. Because as the grassroots support either melted away or never materialized in the first place, his donor support started to evaporate as well. And that last campaign finance report was a real warning sign or an indicator that, look, if I'm running the Randy campaign, I had to choose grassroots or donors early on. I chose donors, and now those donors aren't even staying with me. That's a bad sign.
A lot of other things that happened on June the 2nd. We're not done with the governor's race, but there were others on the ballot, and we will continue this post-mortem of the June 2026 primary election as Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, continues in a moment.
All the great news talk programs you love from KXCL on your radio can be with you wherever you go.
I'm Todd Starnes.
This is Mark Levin.
I'm Tim Harwood.
Bill O'Reilly here.
I'm Kim Commando.
Hey, it's Glenn Beck.
I'm Jeff Stein.
Just download the free KXCL mobile app. You can find us in the App Store or Google Play. Make sure you never miss a second of the conversation. Download the KXCL app today. It's a great way to stay connected to where Iowa comes to talk.
One opportunity. Change your career. Mudd Advertising is hiring product specialists. $20 an hour, paid weekly. That's 52 weeks a year, plus record-breaking profit sharing. Let me repeat, $20 an hour plus record-breaking profit sharing. But we're just getting started. The best in the business, 401k, company match, gold standard health plans, on-site fitness center, generous paid time off, and so much more. Apply today and don't look back.
You're watching Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. Here again is Jeff Stein.
And we continue this conversation reviewing the 2026 Iowa primary. with Gentry Collins and Rob Mudd. Rob, in the last segment, we talked about the fact that there were a variety of joint appearances, debates, call them what you will. Congressman Feenstra did not appear at any of them. Could have done it remotely. On one occasion, he was even in Des Moines when the debate was going to be held. That's an image that it's hard for someone who's crafting message to get around, an empty podium.
He got bad advice, and he took bad advice.
Yeah.
And so his judgment is bad. I mean, that is just it's a political race. You have to be in front of the people. You have to talk to the people. And when you don't show up to talk to the people don't want to talk to you, right?
Sure.
And so they didn't vote for him. I don't know. I'm not saying that was the only thing, but it certainly is a big thing. I couldn't. When I heard that he wasn't going to do it, I couldn't imagine how can you not do this if you're running for governor as a congressman. You need to talk to the people. You've been in D.C. Perfect point. You got to come back and talk. So I just think that was a big strike. 1, 2, 3. The other part that is kind of interesting, I think, is Kim Reynolds and her neutrality throughout this whole thing. Kim did a great job, but I don't think she left the cupboard full when she left. And maybe I'm taking that down the wrong direction, but it just seemed to lack the support that was needed from Kim Reynolds or from someone on the right that was strong. I just never felt like someone wanted to win the race.
And that's a very interesting point, because the governor in the last caucus said she would remain neutral because that's really what Iowa governors had done over time, and then wound up supporting Governor DeSantis.
Yes.
In this race, she said from the start she would not endorse, and did hold to that. At the same time, Ambassador Branstad endorsed Congressman Feenstra. Within the last week of the campaign, Ag Secretary Mike Naig endorsed Randy Feenstra. There was a bit of a movement. Would it have made any difference, or could it have had the reverse effect? If the current governor would say, I'm in essence suggesting who my successor is, could that have had a backlash?
I think it could have. I think it would have, frankly. The governor's endorsement of DeSantis in the caucuses, I think, was the beginning of the end of her political career. Would she have decided for personal reasons not to seek another term? Perhaps. But she never had the same level of cachet. 4 years ago in the last midterm, she led this ticket on the Republican side in very powerful ways and very clearly had coattails. I mean, she chose candidates to challenge sitting incumbents in the legislature of her own party that had not sufficiently voted with her from her perspective. She drug congressional candidates across the line in ways that avoided recounts. I have Marinette Miller-Meeks, for example, 3 wins, 2 recounts, the exception being a 7-point win against Christina Bohannon when Kim Reynolds, at the height of her political power, was on top of the ticket. I think you can mark the beginning of the end of that political power to the day that she endorsed DeSantis. And not because of DeSantis so much, but because it was so late. The race DeSantis was clearly not viable by the time she made the endorsement. It would sort of mirror my criticism of the lateness of the Trump endorsement in the gubernatorial race this time around. It was meaningless, and it kind of had a feel of because I said so. Why should I vote for DeSantis? Because I said so. She never said it, in fairness, but it had that kind of feel to it. And I don't think, had she made more aggressive endorsements, and I say that, by the way, as a supporter and a fan of this governor, I think she's done a great job. I think that was an error in political judgment that she never recovered from, politically speaking.
One of the things that I found interesting also about how that whole campaign, and I'm talking about the primary campaign for governor, played out. A lot of folks, once Congressman Feenstra jumped in, said, okay, we want to save the money on a primary, and that's Attorney General Byrd, that's Ag Secretary Naig, that's Congressman Nunn. What was interesting in the Nunn situation was he sort of looked at it, said, no, I'm not going to run. But when Feenstra did not take off right away, he started looking at it again.
Yes.
And as he told me on the radio, he got a call from the president who said, I need you to stay in the House. And we kind of joked about the fact that he's a colonel in the Air Force Reserve, and the commander-in-chief just gave him an order. But that's what stopped that. So in one respect, they were trying to clear the lane, no pun intended with that.
Yeah.
But it obviously didn't sit well with voters.
Yeah, look, I think they're two different things. The president rightly looked at, how do I keep the House? If you're the president of the United States, would you rather a majority in the House or would you rather have the Iowa governorship? The answer is a majority in the House.
Sure.
And if you're going to have a majority in the House, particularly in the very highly competitive districts that we have here in Iowa, the track record, the statistics on an incumbent's performance versus having an open seat are sort of mind-blowing, right? The incumbents are, I forget exactly the numbers, but I think 90+% of the time incumbents get reelected versus a coin toss at best if it's an open seat. And so I think I read that more as I really needed a good incumbent running for Congress than I was trying to weigh in on the gubernatorial. The gubernatorial seems like got less attention from the president, as evidenced by the very late endorsement, and no other real investment here of political or financial capital that I can discern. So I do think that was more about keeping the House than the gubernatorial.
Rob, did Iowa voters elect, Iowa Republican primary voters, did they elect the strongest candidate to take on Rob Sand? Or too soon to tell?
It's too soon to tell because Sands is strong. There's no doubt. Maybe there's some more fire in this Lane guy. I don't know much about him. Like I didn't see him in his spots. Randy may not have come off. He didn't. He doesn't come off as an aggressive, tough guy. And I don't mean tough guy in a male alpha sense, but assertive and strong, right? And a leader. If anything, he came off. When you're seeing Sands ads and you're seeing Finkster's ads, and you're not thinking primary, you're thinking the governorship, right? And I think maybe people saw he can't beat him, and they went the other direction.
Yeah.
Much more to discuss. Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, continues after this short break.
One opportunity. Change your career. Mud Advertising is hiring product specialists. $20 an hour, paid weekly. That's 52 weeks a year plus record-breaking profit sharing. Let me repeat, $20 an hour plus record-breaking profit sharing. But we're just getting started. The best in the business, 401k, company match, gold standard health plans, on-site fitness center, generous paid time off, and so much more. Apply today and don't look back.
Watch all the programs in the Iowa Talking Points series online at iowatalkingpoints.com. Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, continues with Jeff Stein.
And we continue our review of the 2026 Iowa primary with Gentry Collins, founder and CEO of the American Free Enterprise Chamber of Commerce and principal at CAP Public Affairs, and Rob Mudd, chief futurist of Mud Advertising and one of the authors of the new book, The Ad Man 2.0. Gentry, before the break, I asked Rob if Iowa Republican primary voters elected the strongest candidate. I'll give you the chance to answer the same question.
My answer is we nominated the strongest candidate that was on the primary ballot for the very simple reason that while he's politically untested and unproven, may or may not win this race, I think he has been more responsive to concerns of Iowans in a way that is less transparently political. We don't look like the same old establishment candidate. He talks about how the rural ag economy is not working for the people who live in rural Iowa, which is facially obvious if you drive through the state, right? Outside of the big cities, we're not seeing any real prosperity that I can discern, at least not for everyday common Iowa voters, number one. Number two, we're poisoning our water in ways that are, I think, really important that we get ahead of. Already down near where I live in the Des Moines Media Market, just north of the city, we can't water our lawns because the toxins in the water are so high that Des Moines Water Works can't peel them all out, right? And so already we're not able to water our lawns. There's real concern about all of this. You've got all of this washing down the river. You got the big dead space in the Gulf of America and so forth. And now on top of all of that, you lay the county map of where those waterways are impaired over the highest cancer rates in the country and the highest glyphosate application rates in the country. Who's talking about that? Well, Zach Lane is talking about that. Is that enough to win the race? I don't know, but he's not same old out of central casting politician with the same old tired lines that we're tired of. He is at least confronting issues that are of concern to Iowans, and I think that gives him a fighting chance.
And Rob, to that point, you had 5 Republicans running for governor, 4 of whom had served in the Iowa legislature. The one who won the nomination is the one who had never run for office before, but had run alternate schools. Then you go on the Democrat side. Yes, Rob Sand has won statewide election as auditor, but he's never held legislative office. And so to some degree, it's a battle of outsiders who can each claim the mantle of, hey, I didn't cause this problem, but I can fix it.
The other outsider that we all know is the president, right?
Sure.
And so I would think that some people could say, hey, I like the outsider. I want to see an outsider because what we get from the inside doesn't work, right? And to Gentry's point, what is more important on Iowans' mind than their health, their kids? Are we going to get it has been silent. I was shocked when I found out how bad our wells are in Cedar Falls. Like, why aren't we talking about this, right? And so I think that's an important thing. Because Gentry's right. Binksford's ads all came, hey, I'm a Trump supporter. I love Trump, and I'm going to do things that are right for Iowa. Trite things, right? But on people's minds are the water, the cancer rates, our kids. So I think he's right. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Another thing on the minds of a lot of people, and this is the buzzword from the Democrats, but the Republicans are addressing it for obvious reasons. The buzzword is affordability, and that leads me to take us to Northeast Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. It will be an open seat because Congresswoman Hinson is running for the U.S. Senate. So you've got someone who was the youngest state lawmaker in history when he served in the legislature, yes. Joe Mitchell. He is a home builder talking about mortgage rates and affordability, et cetera. Then you have state legislator Lindsey James on the Democrat side winning the primary, talking about the same sort of issues. It's an interesting mix because you've got a lot of youth, I would suggest, Gentry, and vitality really on both sides and a lot of passion on both sides.
Yes. You do, and you've got sort of a more traditional political debate than we've perhaps had in recent cycles, where both candidates are saying, here's the problem, your solution is wrong, my solution is right, but we at least agree on the problem. And I think that's an important insight as we start the fall. I think that the Democratic Senate candidate is fairly strong on this as well. I think the Democrats, and if I may go back a question, not to take you out of order, Jeff, but before we even get to affordability, this outsider question is very much on the Republican side. I think that's right. On the Democratic side, what I might add is that you had a sort of a pseudo insider that was able to say, I was able to carry Republican territory, right? You have that with Turek in the Senate seat. You have it largely with Sand, and have had that for a year with Sand, saying, look, Democrats have been wiped out of state offices in super minorities in both chambers of the legislature, or were until very recently. And Sand was the lone statewide elected official able to say, not only did I survive, but I thrived. I was elected in big Trump years. I can speak to those voters. And so I think on the Republican side, the outsiders maybe did a little better. On the Democratic side, it seems to me having some of that electoral experience in Trump counties and in Trump cycles was a big feather in the cap of their leading candidates.
One of the things that struck me as we sat here in this studio and talked to 17 people over the course of time, when I would ask a candidate, Rob, why are you running? I got a lot more passion from the Democrats Now, I'm not talking about positions. I'm talking about passion. They got into the race as a result of something that happened or as a result of something that needed to happen in their view. That passion can sway a voter, can it not? I mean, because again, these are emotional purchases.
Yes, absolutely. Emotion is a driving factor to anything, right? And if we can get the emotion of the electorate behind us because they believe in the same things that we do, that's power. I mean, emotion is key to anything, right? If you're not passionate about something, you're not passionate about anything. I mean, maybe that's the what do they call that? Double entendre or something like that.
But it makes perfect sense because again, if I'm a candidate and you're a voter and you say, well, why do you want this job? I better act like I got a reason
absolutely,
for going.
100%. I'm shocked that any politician doesn't show that emotion, right?
Right.
They've got to want the job. They got to want the job. They got to prove they want the job. And the best way to prove it is to talk to people and show them you're invested. You want to do the things that you say that you want to do. And people can read that other than, monotone presentations may say, okay, the guy's just phoning it in maybe. So to answer your question, emotion, you got to have it because it says you can't fake it, right? People want authenticity. If you're emotion, that is authentic and they can see if it isn't as well.
One of the races that I was watching, Gentry, was the race for state auditor, an open seat because Rob Sand is running for governor. And you had a Republican who was a county supervisor running for the seat. Then you had the current lieutenant governor decide to run for the seat when the shuffle it's like the music stopped and Chris Knoyer didn't have a chair anymore because things did not work out as had been anticipated. Right. That's not a criticism. It's something she pointed out. But then on the Democrat side now, and Knoyer did win, but in the closest.
Very competitive, yes.
Other than the governor's race. But then on the Democrat side, they had no auditor candidate, so they peeled one off of the 1st Congressional District who in one breath said, I can't wait to get to Washington to affect change, and then said, or maybe I'll be the state auditor. Yeah. It almost seems like it's everybody's consolation prize, and it's been such a high-profile office, perhaps wrongly, during the Sand era.
It's an interesting observation. It has become a more high-profile office because of Sand's political ambition. Perhaps it should be a high-profile office. We've long been a good government state, and to the extent that you have somebody running that office aggressively, not for political gain, but for taxpayers, might not be all bad. I think as an old former political strategist, I give the Democrats some credit. It is very difficult. Having run the Republican Party of Iowa 20-some years ago, it is very difficult to get candidates who have declared for one seat to move into another. And yet, some of the people that are most likely to run and to run with some passion and vigor and do all of the things that candidates have to do that most of us don't want to have to do, knock on doors and go to these events that we've criticized Feenstra for not going to, and taking all of the slings and arrows and so forth, raising money and all of the rest, the people that are willing to do that and to do it well, to do it with some passion, are the people who've already put their name on the ballot. And so, an Iowa Democratic Party that's looked like it's been, let's say, hibernating, to be complimentary, maybe is starting to come alive a little bit. And my friends in the Republican Party ought to pay attention, right? We're not as ruby red as a spreadsheet might suggest.
When Sands is promoting the auditorship that he held, I found that to be interesting to say, I'm not Minnesota, right? This ain't going to happen under my watch, and it didn't. And that has to resonate certainly with everyone, right? Because that's a mess up north, and that didn't happen down here. And I don't know if he did that on purpose. I would think that he did, because it is a contrast, and it's on the news everywhere you go.
Well, and again, he's from Decorah, so to paraphrase, he can see Minnesota from his house. And so he would, but that is something that, again, most of us don't want to be Minnesota. There's a reason why we live here. And that's one of the strongest points that he can make. And you gentlemen were in this room with me when Auditor Sand was here a few years ago.
Yeah.
his whole pitch then and now is, I don't like politics. I picked a side, but I don't like politics. Yet, he's the leader of the Democrat Party in the November election with folks expecting coattails. That might be a little hard to reconcile, Rob.
It may be, but it's the reality, right?
Sure.
Because he's the only one that you see on the Democratic side. But he has poise, he has presence, he's articulate, he has experience, and he's smooth. And his creative on his commercials were creative, and they would have resonated with a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's beautiful. I mean, it's very, whoever his campaign people are very in tune to utilizing media to get the point across.
I half expected the studio light to go off when you did the clapper. A few more comments as we look to November as Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, continues after this. Iowa has a wonderful heritage, and each day I'll share these stories of historic people and events with you. I'm Jeff Stein. Join me for the Iowa Almanac program and learn more about this great place we call home. Now 7 days a week. Listen on radio stations across the state, via podcast, or at iowaalmanac.com.
One opportunity. Change your career. Mud Advertising is hiring product specialists. $20 an hour, paid weekly. That's 52 weeks a year, plus record-breaking profit sharing. Let me repeat, $20 an hour plus record-breaking profit sharing. But we're just getting started. The best in the business, 401k, company match, gold standard health plans, on-site fitness center, generous paid time off, and so much more. Apply today and don't look back.
You're watching Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. Here again is Jeff Stein.
A few more minutes with Gentry Collins and Rob Mudd as we talk about the impact of the June primary on the November general election. We now know who's going to be there. Well, there are some libertarian candidates who are trying to get on the ballot, and there are some challenges. And again, every vote's going to count. Of all the races, as we sit here in June, barely a week and a half after the primary, closest race in November that you're going to be watching is what?
Well, I wish I could narrow it down to one. I think there are three today that are probably likely to be very, very close. I think that the Zach Nunn race, likely to be very close. We're in a pattern in that seat. That's the Des Moines area seat and into southern and western Iowa, that the parties have been trading back and forth every couple of cycles. And the pattern quite clearly was Republican incumbent serves 2 terms, loses re-election in a Republican midterm. Democratic incumbent then serves 2 terms, loses re-election in a Democratic midterm. We now have a Republican incumbent who's finishing a 2nd term, running in a Republican midterm. That's not a great pattern for Republicans. Now, Zach has been a great candidate, and I think that the National Republican Party and affiliated outside groups have kind of caught on to that pattern and are investing heavily. So I'm optimistic that Zach can win that race, but it will be it's a coin toss race today. So I'd expect that to be very close. Very similar story for Marionette Miller Meeks in the southeastern Iowa seat, Iowa 1. Marionette is in her 3rd term, seeking a 4th. 2 of her previous 3 wins have gone to recount. 1 by 6 votes. Last time, I think, by about a 1/4 of a percentage point or something thereabouts. And Marionette, I'm also bullish on, frankly, because the election that was not a recount for Marionette was a 7-point victory against the same candidate she faces this cycle. That 7-point victory, I think, caused some of those very same outside groups, national money groups, not to invest in her race last time, they will not make the same mistake again. So she will get the outside investment that was lacking last time. Nevertheless, in a Republican midterm cycle, I think that's a race that will be one to watch as being very close. And I think the U.S. Senate race, I think Ashley is a great Republican on top of the ticket, very smart. She's the real deal as a legislator, as a candidate. I'm very excited about Ashley and very bullish about her chances. But I think if the Hinson campaign underestimates Josh Turek, that is a race that could be very, very competitive in November.
Rob, what are some of the races that you're looking at in terms of closeness, either ones that Gentry's already mentioned or some of the others?
Ditto. I mean, right here, he's got them all. The Democrats, I don't know what they spent last time, but maybe they didn't think they had a good shot, but they do this year, and they'll dump a lot of dough in the state of Iowa. I think the Turek, Ashley Henson deal is going to be tough. She's got a big war chest, about $7 million. I don't know what he has, but he's going to have a lot himself, and they're going to go after each other. And he's articulate. He comes from the underdog maybe perspective even more so than with his situation that he's in. He's done a lot of cool things. He seems to be a likable guy. His spots are him doing things, right? He's active. He's nothing can hold me back. And Ashley's more monotone, maybe a little bit. So she got a race on her hands, and she's going to have to be out there, and she's going to have to be willing to get a little dirty this time around, I think.
One of the things I always look at is voter registration. Mm-hmm. And by that, I'm talking about party preference. Yeah. Now, going into the June primary, which is every month the Secretary of State issues a report, and you can see how this breaks down. Non-affiliated voters made up the largest block in 3 of the 4 congressional districts. More than Republicans, more than Democrats. Now, and I'm talking about Northeast Iowa 2nd, Southeast Iowa 1st, and Central and South Central Iowa 3rd, where you had the largest block was non-affiliated, then Republican, then Democrat. In far western Iowa, the 4th district, the reddest district probably in the country, Republicans hold the voter registration advantage. The thing that makes this interesting to me, and I'll ask you first, Gentry, then you, Rob, with all of those non-affiliated voters, very hard to predict. Most of them didn't participate in a primary. And it really seems, especially with 2 open congressional seats, an open Senate seat, an open governor's seat, we just have no idea how things are going to turn out, because that's such a volatile group that either could swing this way, that way, or stay home.
Yeah. It's a great observation, Jeff, and I think the great question this fall is what does Iowa tell the rest of the country about national political realignment? Mm-hmm. I think that Iowa is a great case study to understand, clearly the country's looking for something. We've been flip-flopping majorities back and forth for 2 decades. Right. I think in all that time, as we've discussed on this program before, only one cycle with no change. Unprecedented in American history. We have presidential preferences on both sides of the aisle. From Bernie Sanders primary voters, their next choice was Donald Trump. Right. I mean, these are not standard, typical political times. The country's trying to tell the political establishment something. The political establishment doesn't seem to be listening. Iowa is, I think, and not to be provincial in any way, I don't say this because it's my home state, but objectively speaking, I think Iowa is the most interesting place to try to understand political realignment in modern America, because we are one of the very few states that has seen partisan results change. We went from pretty reliably Democratic federally to pretty reliably Republican federally with no population change. Now, other states that have had that kind of electoral change tend to have had some population change. Think of Colorado, a couple states to our west, that used to be red, then was purple, now is blue, but they had so much in-migration from California that it isn't that the electorate changed their minds, it's that the electorate changed. The electorate has not changed, and yet voter registration has. Now, independents may be the biggest swath, but head-to-head, Republicans do have a registration advantage of about 200,000 people or so.
Significant.
One of the things I was watching on primary night is Democrats had a competitive primary statewide. that was in question on the Senate matter. Republicans, of course, had a competitive primary statewide for governor, where nobody seemed to be excited about any of the candidates, candidly. And the national narrative, as it often is in a midterm, the party of the president is a little depressed. The minority party has some energy, which you described earlier in terms of the candidates that you've interviewed. You find that energy in them, and I see that as well. So on primary night, what happens? Does the Republican registration advantage evaporate because we're not as excited as the Democrats this time around? The answer was no. Statewide, Republicans turned out more voters than Democrats did. And so I think that, number one, for Democrats continues to be a challenge. They really materially went backwards with voters that used to be theirs. At the same time, for my Republican friends and colleagues, we haven't become Republican. We've become a pro-Trump, anti-National Democratic Party. As the National Democratic Party sort of went crazy left. I don't know what a woman is. I want men and girls sports. I want all of the right. In fact, if I were still running the ads for the Republican Party, which I am not, okay, to their credit, they don't listen to me anymore, which is probably smart. But I would go dig up the stuff like Rob Sand stands in front of Democrats in Iowa City not long ago. And quite publicly says, well, I'm not going to support you on all the stuff you want unless we win more races. You can't have the stuff you want unless we win. Now, very smartly, politically, he's doing what he needs to do to win, but he's also telling you, if you listen carefully, I really do embrace that lefty agenda, right? Why do we have all of those independents that used to be Dems? Why do we have a Republican majority among, when you look at it head to head? It isn't because they've embraced the John McCain, Mitt Romney, George W. Bush Republican Party. It's because they've rejected the AOC National Democratic Party. Rob Sand's doing a great job of saying, I'm not that. But if you listen carefully, there are some warning signs that maybe that there's a little bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing. If I were running the Republican Party, I'd be racing like mad to reveal that, because I think that is exactly what those independent voters are listening for.
I think his first name, based upon the news releases, is Radical Rob Sand, just like it is, I want to make sure I get this right, career political operative and Kansas carpetbagger Zach Lane. Yeah. And I say that, Rob, because the day after the primary, the Sand campaign, the state Democratic Party, and the National Democratic Party all used that same phrase verbatim in their news releases. So, again, as somebody who designs messages for a living, that's what we're being taught. That's what we're being fed. Good luck to all those independents.
I think it's, I was unaware of this living situation that
for Lane
that he has, right? And if I'm the Democrats, I hammer that all day long, all day, every day, for until either he moves home with all of his kids. So that brings me back to another question: where was the Iowa GOP party in the supporting of who they were going to support? Right? We talk about good, bad candidates. They kind of missed, I think, on the governorship. I believe that, how can you have a guy that represents you, wants to be your governor, that doesn't live in the state?
Well, one thing that's interesting, and it's interesting you say that, because, again, the state party is to be neutral in a partisan primary, okay? That's officially, right? I found it fascinating how many people, and I'm going from the party chair to elected officials, presumed that Jim Carlin had no chance in the primary for U.S. Senate. And again, Ashley Hinson had a solid win. But the point is, you have to point out there's a primary. You have to, and they treated the Senate race very different than they did the governor's race. And that's something that probably no one will talk about publicly in terms of, the elected officials gave endorsements, but they seem to keep the thumb off the scale on that race and maybe not in some of the others. Is that an unfair portrayal, Gentry?
I think it depends what you think of as the party. If you have an expansive definition, then you'd see the party being a little schizophrenic on this. I think that those rules really only apply to the party apparatus itself, which in primary season is and I say this as an alum, okay, and a supporter, and I think they have a very important role to play in the caucuses, where they run the caucuses. I think they have a very important role to play in the general election in terms of voter registration, voter ID, get out the vote efforts, and so forth. But candidly, the apparatus of the party itself is pretty impotent during the primaries. Now, some of the people that average voters might associate with the Republican Party or with the Democratic Party, they're just not bound by the same rules, and they shouldn't be bound by the same rules. So I don't. My own view is that the party proper, narrowly defined, really plays almost no role in the primary.
It is a fascinating conversation because we're talking about Iowa politics, and there is never a dull moment, as proven there. Gentlemen, thank you for the insight today, and we'll look forward to November.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
By my count, there are 11 races, either statewide or for Congress, which means there are at least 22 candidates if you just count Republicans and Democrats. And there's a chair at this table for all of them, should they choose to take advantage of it. That brings us to the close of our primary election season of Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. Thanks to Gentry Collins and Rob Mudd, and thanks to all of you for being with us.
This has been Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, produced by Studio 5 at Mudd Advertising, Totally Iowa Media, and News Talk 1540 KXCL. For more information on this series, go to iowatalkingpoints.com.